Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Olam chaseri bane. 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 Da da da. Da 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 da. And you must build this world from love. Da 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 da. And if we build this world from love, da 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 da.
Be like super heavy dippy. It's
God
good.
will build this world from love. Da 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 da. Olam chaseni bane. Da 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 da. Olam chaseni bane. Da da da.
Welcome everybody. Good to see so many friends joining us this morning, this afternoon, wherever it is that you are today at this hour. Welcome. I muted you all as you were joining, as some people were talking in the background, but feel free to unmute unless you do have background noise. And we're going to get started in just a minute. Lots of people are coming in still. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Marian Gribbetts. I'm the director of our professional development offerings at Hebrew College in Newton, Massachusetts. So glad to have so many of you here today. And this is our last workshop in the series for 2021-22, but we are busy at work planning for 22-23, and we may actually even reach out to all of you in the coming week with any suggestions you may have for some of these sessions. I'll give it one more minute, but it's my privilege this morning to welcome to our space a dear friend and colleague, Oren Kampfer, who is the Madrich Ruchani at the Jewish Community Day School here in Greater Boston. The actual location is Watertown, Mass. And we're in for a treat today. Oren has spent much of his professional life at JCDS, providing spiritual and ruach-filled experiences for the students, as well as for the faculty at JCDS here in Boston. So it looks like most of the group is here right now, so I am going to turn it over to Oren. And feel free to open your camera so we can see your faces. And also feel free to put any questions in the chat or raise your hand, and I'll be monitoring that. And that, I think, is it for the instructions for this morning. Oren.
Great. Thanks, Marion. Great to see everyone. Some familiar faces here, some new faces to me. So it's really nice to be with everybody. I think I'm going to skip over the usual introductions, the Zoom introductions, because sometimes those end up taking a long time. So we can all wave hello to one another. And if you have friends in other Zoom boxes from other, different Jewish connections, feel free to say hello to one another. But we'll kind of get into things. So I was very honored and grateful that Marion asked me to do this today. I've been working with Marion for the last few years in Hebrew College, bringing mindfulness and mindfulness through a Jewish lens to some of our supplementary schools around Boston. And I have worked at JCDS doing the same. And it is in partnership with the Institute for Jewish Spirituality that I've been able to do that. So much thanks to IJS. If you're unfamiliar with IJS, they have amazing offerings for both for students and also for educators and lay people. And I really highly recommend checking out their offerings. And these days, a lot of what they are sending out is free. So that's also nice. So there, over the last number of years, there's been, this kind of, I'd say, a growing push to bring mindfulness has become more of a buzzword around the educational space, around just the general, I'd say just the general buzzword in all over. And so I thought that I would share some of the things I've been exploring. So I'm going to share some slides. And I may bring on and take off the slides at different points, just so I can see all of your lovely faces. But here we go. So let's see how we do here. Okay, so a lot of what I do at JCDS is I try and take tefillah off of the page. We spend a lot of our time in Jewish day schools and in Hebrew schools and synagogues trying to teach all of these amazing words that have been flowing in our tradition for years and years. And I think that's incredibly important, giving people the literacy and the ability to join in a kahal when they come into a prayer space. It's a big part of our educational mission. And I also think that it's important to help children understand that there are multiple pathways into tefillah, and that one of my main goals is to teach kids that tefillah is not relegated only to the Siddur, right? The Siddur is a tool, but that's not where all of tefillah lives. And so I do that in a number of different ways. And about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was lucky enough to be part of a pilot through IJS, through the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. And it was a pilot program bringing mindfulness into Jewish educational settings, camps, synagogues, schools. And it was really, it was beautiful. I had practiced a little bit of mindfulness on my own before, but not in that kind of an intentional way. And so I added this to my toolbox at school. And so I thought I'd share with you just a few of the things that I've kind of gleaned from that. So these days, a lot of people talk about mindfulness and a lot of people talk about tefillah, and some people talk about mindfulness and tefillah. But what I've tried to do, and I'd say it's a work in progress, but it's something that I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to make students and staff understand that mindfulness really is tefillah. It's not mindfulness over here and tefillah over there, although often that is what it looks like. But really, my goal is to let people understand that tefillah is mindfulness and mindfulness can be tefillah. And so I thought about a few different approaches. I've had a few different approaches of how to do that over the past few years. And one of them is we often have some alternative tefillot. And so one of the one of the options was to have another minyan, but it was more of a mindfulness focused minyan, but it still followed the full arc of Shachari. And the theme of that minyan was less is more. Say less, fewer words. It's not a race to get in as many words as you can, but it's more about trying to connect inward. And I had some success with that. And I'm happy to share individually about some of the things that I did in that minyan. It was a mix of mindfulness practices and a lot of singing with tefillot that were just kind of pared down to maybe a phrase instead of a full paragraph of words and things like that. That's actually not what I'm going to talk about mainly, but I did want to just throw that out there as an option, because I think a lot of people have done that. I know a lot of the schools in the area have done that with a lot of success, a lot of camps also. So it is that is one of the options. Now, Orna Siegel's on this. I'm sure your heart is a flutter seeing our old Beit Knesset here. I'm very lucky to have this beautiful Beit Knesset here at the Jewish Community Day School. And so already I think that space is incredibly important in terms of opening people's heart to tefillah. And but I will say that a lot of the mindfulness work that I do takes place in this room, but a lot of it also takes place in a classroom. So while it's beautiful that we have this great Beit Knesset, I think this work can actually be done anywhere. And so I actually show you this picture with almost the opposite reason, right? It's like, this is a great prayer space and you don't need it. And so I want to bring students from when they hear tefillah to go from to and so how can we do this? So one was to create something new, that sort of less is more approach. But the other approach I want to talk about today was integrating these practices into the existing structure, because I know that in education, in schools and camps, wherever it is, one of the biggest challenges is working against the clock, and trying to fit in some new thing in is impossible. I don't have the time to open up a whole new mindfulness class 45 minutes a week. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to find just minutes, really, little moments in the existing tefillah where we can pause and sort of integrate something that's more interwoven into what's already going on. And that serves two purposes. One is it means that you're not giving up time from another place. And two, it's going to be that interweaving of tefillah and mindfulness is going to, that's going to be kind of swallowed by the students, and they're going to see it as being connected and not like, okay, we'll go over here, do our mindfulness and yoga, and then after that, we'll go over to tefillah. So, so I thought, let's try a few of these and you can see kind of what it's like, and we'll just try them out. So one sort of like low-hanging fruit that I think some people even on this Zoom have heard me talk about is to use Berachot HaShachar, which are the morning blessings. And many people use these blessings as a way of kind of getting into, they're studied as part of the early education of tefillah. Some people may not study them at all. They're a beautiful set of 15 blessings that come at the beginning of the Siddur, and they're really based on this idea from the Talmud of you get up, and as you go through your morning routine, there's a little bracha that gets attached to it. And then later on, it got codified into the Siddur and part of the Shacharit service. But really, you should be doing these kind of like, if you were really doing them as they were originally conceived, you'd be getting up, and as you put your feet on the ground, you'd be saying one, and as you're standing up straight, you'd be saying one, and as you open your eyes, you'd be saying one. So we kind of go back to that a little bit, and a classic mindfulness practice is the body scan. And you may be familiar with this from, the end of a yoga session. You might be familiar with it from various kinds of mindfulness exercises. And it's incredibly effective and really easy to, it's really easy to kind of get into. So what I do is I just invite everyone to close their eyes. So we'll do this now. So I'll invite everyone to close your eyes. And often I'll kind of talk this out a little bit as a full practice, but also with a little of my kind of teacher hat on. So one question often people have is, what happens when there's a kid who doesn't close their eyes? So I always say to the kids, I invite you to close your eyes. I'm going to keep my eyes open so that I see that you're closing your eyes, because then it feels a lot safer for everyone else to know that they're not the only ones with their eyes closed. And if you're having a really hard time closing your eyes right now, you can just look down at your hands if you have your hands on your desk, or you could kind of like keep your head low. But we want everyone to feel safe and to feel that when their eyes are closed, other people aren't looking at them, they're in their own individual space. So I'll invite you to do that. And here on Zoom, if you're doing it on Zoom, by all means, if you feel that you want to shut off your camera, that's great. So we have some brachot from Berachot HaShachar, and I'm not going to go through all of them. I've just chose a couple to help guide us through this body scan. But before we get into that, let's just take a few breaths and settle into where we are right now. You can start to recognize that maybe you've been rushing through your day, haven't had a chance to pause. You can put down your pen and let everything that's happened already today just settle down. Start to notice that you're sitting. Feel the sensation of your chair under your legs. And really put your mind and your focus right there in that physical sensation. You can let that physical sensation bring you into right now. You're feeling that right now. And anything that happened before now, you can let it fall aside. Anything that's coming up this afternoon, you don't have to think about it right now. Right now, we're just going to be here. And as we enter into this moment of tefillah, it's really good to just ground ourselves, pause, prepare. Let's take a moment to just shift our focus to our breath. Noticing where we feel it as it comes in. How it feels going out. And now let's put our focus into our torso and just straighten it up a little bit so we can find that balance of attention and relaxation. And as we straighten our spine, maybe become a little bit taller, we can say the bracha, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokef kefufim. We're grateful to God for straightening the bent. We can feel our own bodies straighten. And then we'll move down our body, noticing our legs, sensations in our thighs, our knees. All the way down to our feet. Placing our attention on our feet, we feel the earth solidly beneath our feet, that firm ground. We're balanced. We can say Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, roka haaretz al hamayim. God, thank you. God who stretches out the solid earth over the waters. And we can feel that earth making us stable. And from here, we can feel our arms and our hands, noticing any sensations in our fingertips. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa li kol tzarki. God who's given me all that I need. Fingers to do the work, the fine work, and the big work that I'll be doing today. And then we'll take all of that sensation in our body and letting our focus turn towards our heart. Thinking about how we're going to use our body and our minds to bring some chesed into the world today. Baruch atah Adonai gomel chasadim tovim amo Yisrael. When you're ready, you can open your eyes or turn on your camera. So it's just a little bit of a different way of approaching the brachot, those same brachot, but they might feel a little bit different to the students. And it's also a really nice way to open up a session of tefillah. You can imagine that the room might have a different vibe after doing that, which is not probably a lot different in time than if you were going through those brachot. 15 brachot, you're saying them, you're telling them what page, line 7, But this time we just kind of opened up, all right, we've added 2 minutes. Maybe we're going to remove one tefillah from later on in our mapeh and our kind of structure of tefillah. But I think it was probably worth the extra focus on those brachot. So that's kind of a little bit of a taste of what it could look like. Now, I'm not going to do practices for all of the tefillot, but I've been kind of playing around with different things. So we had an amazing teacher through IJS. He's actually a secular mindfulness teacher. He teaches in schools. His name is Daniel Rechstaven, and I will share in just a second a link to his book. But he had this great concept, which was for kids, it's not all about just kind of practicing mindfulness. It's playing mindfulness and paying attention instead of paying attention. And so we have to remember the ages and stages of all of our students, right? So if I'm with a bunch of second graders, I'm going to change the way that I just did that practice, right? That was probably going to hit home a little better for maybe 6th, 7th, maybe 5th graders too. But if I have second graders, I'm going to make it a lot more physical. I'm going to make it a little bit more playful. So he has all these great exercises, and there are actually lots of different books, secular mindfulness books, that have incredible practices that are playful. There's another one I will also link momentarily called How to Train Your Elephant, which has just like little one-pagers on all these different exercises. So I like to kind of play a game of like pairing the tefillah and the mindfulness exercise, and then try and experiment with the kids and see how it lands. So one that I've had that was pretty successful was Baruch She'amar, which is also another place where it's the beginning of the tefillot. a theme of Baruch She'amar is the power of speech, right? God spoke, Baruch She'amar v'haya olam. God spoke and the world came into being. And so in talking about that, there's a lot of different angles you could approach that tefillah with. One is that our speech can have real creative power, but it also can have power to destroy. So if we pay a little bit more attention to what's coming out of our mouths, that might change the way we use our speech. And so a fun game to play with the kids is right before you do Baruch She'amar, take a couple minutes, have them turn and talk to a neighbor, invite them to just say what they did over the weekend, but just don't use the word or like. So you can imagine that a fourth grader, a seventh grader, they like a challenge, and this is very difficult for them. So they start to talk and they realize that they can only speak very much like a robot when they're watching every word that they say. And they have great fun with this. For some of them, it's incredibly stressful and makes them re-examine their whole way of speaking. But don't worry, in 15 minutes, they've forgotten all about it. But for that moment, it can turn on Baruch She'amar. And the next time that they come to Baruch She'amar, the next week or in a year from now, it might trigger that idea of, wow, I'm gonna keep an eye on my speech today. Now, that's not the same. That's not going to create the same vibe as like what we just did with the body scan, right? That was like kind of classic mindfulness, calms the room. This is going to have people uppity, laughing, and all this stuff, but they're paying attention, and they are being mindful, and they're kind of exercising their noticing muscle. So that's kind of a totally different way of approaching another tefillah. I want to. I'll just pause right now and see if anybody has any questions or comments before we continue. I'm going to just stop the share for a second. And if you don't have any, that's great. Let's see, thank you, Marion, for putting in the Mindful Education Workbook.
Oren, I didn't catch the other book that you cited.
Oh yeah, let me add that in there. It's called How to Train Your Elephant.
Right. Okay.
And I do, if I can find my slides and all the tabs, then there we go. That too. Okay. I'll throw it in the chat. And then we'll get back into things. All right. So we'll move forward. I'm kind of keeping to the arc of the service just to sort of exemplify that this can be done and still give people a sense of, I was in a tefillah. I went through the whole experience, right? And I would usually only do one of these in a tefillah session, one of these and then, maybe a week later, I would do that. But the other thing to remember about the mindfulness exercises and practices is that they are not one and done. It's a practice, right? So that by nature, that means that you benefit from doing it multiple times. So if you did a Birchot HaShachar body scan last week, there's nothing to say you can't do it again the next week. In fact, kids you might find that the kids are hungry for it, and you can do it with different brachot. So let's see, we'll go back here. So I had a really fun experience this year of working with a teacher at a local synagogue, and we were kind of brainstorming using her service and like where can she add things in. So we actually came up with some stuff that I really liked. So of course she was using a lot of singing, and I also use a lot of singing. So one little practice that you can do is sing the tefillah, the same tune, the same tefillah that you've been singing the whole year. But you can just slow it down a little bit and have the kids pay attention to what it feels like to feel their voice. So they can put their hand like on their chest. And as they sing, hallelujah, they can just notice what it feels like. Or you can have them, I've noticed with masks and indoor tefillah, often I can only hear myself and I can't really hear other people. So you could have people like trade off listening or really singing quietly and then singing loudly and trying to find a balance between all of their voices. So playing with different voices during Psukei Zimra, these songs of praise, or any time in your tefillah where you're singing, can be a great experience. And then really what you want to remember to do is just make that connection. You got to name it, right? So if you have them slow down their singing or experience the singing as sort of a more experiential moment, don't miss that opportunity to remind them like, oh, you know, that you were doing a great job noticing. And that's also connects to our mindfulness practices. You were just being mindful of your voice when we were singing that, you know, Psalm 148. And then that's going to help draw these two things together. So we took a look at, there's the book from Daniel. Okay, so we took a look at Baruch Hu with this teacher, and we were thinking about that moment of tefillah when Baruch Hu comes. And classically, Baruch Hu is this moment where like, okay, we've been warming up, we've been getting ready, but this is the call to prayer, classically called, right? So we were thinking, well, what could we do with that? So we came up with a couple of different fun things. So one is a lot of the mindfulness, the inroads into mindfulness for any age, but especially for students, is that physical. So a body scan is a great entry. So you can really lean into the physicality of our tefillah. There's a lot of different movement in our tefillah. So you can have them notice, have your students notice like, Baruch Hu, okay, this is the beginning. This is also going to be our first big bow of the day. And so we can slow that down. We can attach the different physical movements of the bow to the different words of Baruch Hu and really like feel it. You could even slow down the bow, and you could do like a slow motion contest of who can bow slower. And so that you just really have them, you're really just helping them to do the same things they're doing regularly in tefillah, but actually pay more attention to them. So that was one idea, was to make the physical moment of the bow. And then the other idea we had, which I thought was nice, was this idea of the call to prayer. Sometimes I'll bring in videos into tefillah as a way of kind of sparking conversation. And so she had a great idea, which was to, let's see, is it here? Yes. So she had a great idea, which was this, and I apologize for all those tabs on the screen. You'll ignore those. I often feel like when I show my tabs, it's like someone's come and looked in my sock drawer or something. But anyway, the idea was that you have this kind of sonic like call to prayer with Baruch Hu. And so we can think about what are some other times and places where we're having this kind of like this sonic recall, this thing that's going to like call us all to prayer. So first we could talk about the shofar, especially if it's in the beginning of the year, but the shofar can always be a great discussion point. You can play the shofar, have people listen to it. You can use either a singing bowl or even one of the classroom chimes, have people really like pay attention to that. And that could be like your entry into Baruch Hu. And then she had a great idea, which was there's a series of Taco Bell commercials where they really play into the idea of, let's see. Let's see, are you still seeing my slideshow, or are you seeing this tab? You're seeing the YouTube tab? Okay. So the idea is there's like 4 or 5 of these, but every time that the person like bumps into something and it makes that dinging sound, then they're like, oh my gosh, I got to go to Taco Bell. So then you can kind of like use that as a little conversation starter to be like, oh, the shofar, it's Baruch Hu, or oh, the chime, it's Baruch Hu. So that was interesting. And then we decided that Baruch Hu is also this moment of kind of like, here we go. Are you ready? Like often I'll tell the kids that Baruch Hu is like the Shaliach Tzibor saying, are you ready to pray? And everybody else is saying, yes, I'm ready to pray. And so there's another great mindfulness exercise, which is called the Hinani Check-In. And if we were doing it in full right now, the way it works, it's very simple, but it's very effective. You have a group of people, and it could be a small group or a big group. And all you do is you just turn to one person, like I might say to Marion, Marion, are you here? And then Marion would say, let me think, I'm like 85% here. And maybe Marion's going to tell us why they're not here. Oh, I haven't had lunch and my breakfast was kind of small. My stomach's rumbling and I keep getting these emails on the side about this meeting this afternoon. So, I'm not like totally here, but I'm pretty much here. And then the asker's job is to say, is there anything we can do to bring you more here? And so maybe Marion will say, no, I think I'm okay. Or maybe, can I have a minute I want to just actually respond to this person. I'm in a meeting right now, and then I'll be more focused. Okay, great. And then Marion goes on and asks, someone else, Orna, are you here? And so you can do this. It's nicer in a small group because it takes less time, but you can certainly do it with a bigger group. And it's an amazing thing to do. It does take time, but it would be like an amazing thing to do in that Baruch Hu moment, because like you're about to get into the main section of the Tefillah, the Shema, Amidah, and so for people to have that pause and be like, oh wait, let me just like get into it here. It would be an incredibly useful thing, not just in that moment, but for future Tefillot, where you could even just call back to it and be like, all right, we don't have time to do the full Hinani check-in, but let me ask everybody, are you here? Okay, what do you think? You could give them, they could do like a fist of 5 even. And it's a way of checking in. So that way, right before Baruch Hu, you have these 3 options, right? You have kind of like this audio option, you have the real physical one, and then you have this mental one where kids can kind of look inside for a second. And then they might find that they're a little more present. And the Hinani check-in also works great at the beginning of a class because it actually tips off teachers into like where different kids are. Oh, I had this blowout with my friend at recess and I really just need to go get a drink of water. Great, go ahead. And then like why they can't concentrate.
Warren, there's a question from Dory.
Great.
Can the Hinani check-in be done simultaneously with groups of 3 or so if you have a large group?
Yes, I would say that's a great question. Definitely, you can break them into 3s or 4s. And the only thing is I would model it pretty clearly first, because if you don't have a teacher to sit in each of those groups, someone's going to forget this, or there's going to be a joke about that. But if you do a clear modeling, even with, all right, we're going to do the first 3 all together as a group, and then you're going to split out into your groups. I think that would be the way to go, but definitely. And the Hinani check-in is one that we bring back a lot, and people it goes a little quicker and it gets better every time you do it. And I'll make another Hinani check-in in just a second, a little connection to that. Any other questions? You can do the hand raise if you want, or anything else. Okay. All right, so then I wanted to just kind of move forward to the Amidah for a second, and we'll do this practice together. So the Amidah is, there's a lot there, obviously, and I started to think about with our students this idea, when I introduced the Amidah to the first graders, I talk about how you're introducing yourself to God and being like, remember my, you don't know me that well, but you knew my grandmother and Abraham and Sarah, and that we're related. So it's kind of like you're opening up this relationship with God by making these connections. And so we actually think back to these ancestors of ours, to these people that we know and we feel this connection to, and we're bringing them into our Amidah so that we can open up a relationship and a conversation with God and sort of open our hearts. So interestingly, if you look at the text of the first bracha of the Amidah, which is here, and I apologize, I don't have it in transliteration. But so we have this bracha, and first you kind of name you're kind of giving God the context. It's actually God who is giving Moshe the context, if you go back to the quote where this came from. But either way, you're playing a little Jewish geography with God. And then you start to say all these qualities, right? First, some qualities of God, Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor, Vahanora, Elyon, and then Gomel, Chasadim, Tovim, God who acts with kindness and love. V'koneh hakol, creates all. V'zocher chastei avo v'imaho. So God who remembers the actions of our ancestors. So that's the kind of spot where I would zoom in a little bit. And this is a great practice from Daniel's book. Obviously Daniel, or not so obviously, but Daniel was not thinking of the Amidah when he penned this practice, but it's called positive qualities. So what I'm going to invite you to do, I'll take you through this practice, and I'll invite you again, if you feel more comfortable shutting off your camera, go right ahead, closing your eyes. And as you close your eyes, again, we'll just kind of get into that more relaxed state. So you can take a few deep breaths. And I often find the first couple breaths, we're still settling. Give yourself permission to just relax. Take that extra inhale and exhale. And as you relax your body, you can relax your mind. And I'd like you to think to yourself of a person who to you really symbolizes acts of loving kindness, chesed. Somebody that you know, maybe someone you're close with. And conjure up an image of them in your closed eyes. There they are in front of you. Now you can envision them actually doing something kind, the way that they do so often. Maybe something small or something big. Maybe it's for you or for others. Now I'd like you to put yourself into their shoes. Now you're doing that act of kindness. What does that feel like? Notice where in your body you feel the sensation what it's like to do that act of kindness, that chesed. You can let that feeling, that vision, that person maybe inspire you to bring a little more chesed into your day, into the day of others. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. Now, when we say the Amidah this morning, and we say these words of God, remembering the acts of chesed of our ancestors, you can think about that person, those acts, how it felt, and maybe what you're going to do today to add a little bit of chesed into what you do. And then you start the Amidah. And at the end, ask them how it felt different than another time when they did the Amidah. Because that's one of the most important things about these practices, is reflecting on them. And it could be, a kid saying, didn't feel any different at all. Or I couldn't even think of anybody, I had a hard time. And then you're going to get somebody else who says, I thought about my grandmother and she was right in front of me. And that might help the person who had a hard time. Oh, next time maybe I'll think about my grandmother. Or maybe the other kid who was totally quiet, who couldn't do it, feels a little bit more comfortable because they heard this kid had a hard time. But that moment of reflection really, it's sort of what lets all of this good stuff kind of sink into the students. It's just sort of sitting on the surface and it's great. But when you add in the reflection piece, that's when it really gets soaked in. And that's the hardest part, because your teacher mind is saying, I got to get to the next thing. I got to move on. I don't have time for this reflection. But take the 3 minutes or less, say, we just have time for 2 comments. What did you notice? And then sometimes it's as simple as they say something, I noticed that I really felt it in my shoulders when I was thinking about those acts. Nice. That's good noticing. I like that you could feel that and notice what it felt like for you at that time. Okay, we're gonna all say the Amidah, and you can keep that in mind as we say it. You might not be able to say Aleinu that day, but it's probably gonna be worthwhile. So I'm gonna stop the share there for any kind of questions, comments. Yes, Gina.
Hi, Oren. Thank you. This is invaluable information and approach. My question is, twofold. One is, how do you handle, obviously these are different, you address these on different levels, as you said earlier. So how do you address this when you have a variety of ages in one space? Let's just say like 3rd grade to 7th grade.
Yeah, great question. I would have to choose the practice that would match that age group best. So I don't think it would be possible to do that positive qualities meditation with a group of 3rd through 7th graders. But I do think it might be possible to do the body scan with them, especially if you've done it with the 7th graders before. And if the 3rd graders see that the 7th graders are doing it, they'll probably do it. And I would, no matter what, I think the general rule is the more people in the room, the shorter the practice.
Good point. If I could just piggyback on that, this type of mindful prayer is foreign to most of our children, at least where I am.
And to most adults.
With 1,000% correct. How do you get them to take it seriously? Because I could see kids joking, and I mean, this is it takes time.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. So, okay, first of all, I'll tell you two things. One is not everyone has this luxury, but options are great. The kids who opt into, doing a mindfulness tefillah once a month are going to automatically take it more seriously. And if they don't, you can remind them that they opted into it. It takes practice, and it's okay. You might have to suffer through some giggles a couple of times, and it would be great. Like what Marion and I have been establishing in some of the schools around here is working this through from entering it from the classroom, which is going to be a huge help, right? If they have the foundation from a classroom, even if they spend 10 minutes once a week, they always start their class with a mindfulness exercise. Then when you bring it in tefillah, it's easier to kind of turn that muscle on. But, a lot of times it's also naming it. You can say this, for some of you, you might do this all the time. For others of you, this might be new and kind of weird. Let's just try this out together. We'll see how it goes. You might find that it makes your tefillah feel a little different. You might find that it does nothing for you, but it's only going to be a couple minutes. Let's try it out.
If I could just also amplify what Oren just said, that it does take time and it takes practice, and to start really, 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 really small. Like with a teeny, the Hinani moment that Oren described, do that once for literally 3 minutes and build on that. I see that Kim's camera is off, because if her camera was on and she was with us, I would ask her to share. I've observed in her school, the kids literally lying on the floor, and it took, lying on the floor quietly, meditating. And it took years for her to get to that. So just, really start small. And so much of what Oren is sharing with us today are little small interventions that you can try in the smallest kinds of ways.
Yeah, and also I think a great entry point to the credit of Daniel is that idea of playing mindfulness, right? That they're not going to be giggling, or it doesn't really matter if they are, when they're trying to not say and like. Or we have a few other games that we play, the distraction game, where you get to try and, everyone's trying to keep their focus and somebody's making a distraction sound. And so it's fun for them. And then once they get into the idea of like, oh, this is fun, this is enjoyable. And actually, wait a second, the reflection piece, somebody's going to say, oh, you know what? That minute really, that made me kind of way calmer than I was 10 minutes ago. So once they hear that, it's good. The truth is, I don't think there's going to be many kids who are going to giggle any more at this than they are at Ashrei on a regular week. So, might as well roll the dice. Yeah. Denise.
Yeah, I'm actually in a new setting, and there are a lot of very longtime teachers who are super resistant to any change. I mean, I've tried a couple of these things, but this feels really big. Like they don't even want to try a new melody to something. And so I'm wondering if you or anyone here has done pieces with the teaching staff, and we have a teaching staff that's not all Jewish, and a day school where not every student is Jewish. So I'm sort of toying with how to get everyone on the train.
Yeah, great question. Yes, I should say that the IJS program started with a small group of teachers, and only that group of teachers, and then it expanded it out to the full staff and then to the students. Because you can't, all teachers know you can't be teaching something that you don't believe in and don't really embody yourself. So yes, we do a lot of mindfulness with the staff here, and there was definitely a lot of resistance. And There still is some, but I would say way less than before. And you can use the same tricks with your resistant teachers as you would with your resistant third grader. They're going to be way more responsive to a fun game than they are with sitting and noticing their breath. And then reflect with them, and they'll start to really appreciate it. And again, I think the teachers, maybe more than the students, would appreciate 5 minutes of a mindfulness exercise at the beginning of their boring staff meeting than not having it. So it's definitely that it's a valid question and certainly a challenge. There's no like magic bullet, but I think just trying it out. And also you can invite, what we actually did was we had a core group of teachers who are in a mindfulness team, and we offered that we could do kind of what we called push-in mindfulness. So the third grade teacher who was maybe reticent to do it themselves, we said, oh, we'll have this other teacher come in on Tuesdays, do 10 minutes with the kids. And then that teacher sees like, oh, wait a second, the kids are actually into this. And then that's another way of kind of getting it in there.
I see Richie Rosenberg's hand up, so we'll take his question.
It's a she. I
Oh,
apologize,
sorry.
my camera's not working.
It's
We just
their
added
question.
something that we actually use, that we have a small Tuesday group. So we've added this year, first time we've added the, well, it was Mincha, now it's Mariv. So we have that group and we do extra stuff with them. And then they're sort of, I feel like they're more focused on Sunday mornings for Shacharit. So that actually works because we have a small discussion, sometimes with the rabbi come in and they have they have more education than the other kids. So on Sunday morning, they will lead or they'll be part of engaging or be more responsible. So that's one thing. And with adding things, we've had people come in and every week adding something, which I teach third grade, and that's too much for the kids. The kids need to be working on the same thing for a few weeks. That's just hands-on experience, and not add too much every week. So once a month, add something new or change something, because if it's changing on them, they feel out of spot. Or even if a guest comes in and leads the tefillah differently, they feel like they're shaken up and they don't want to take part. So everything has to be very, to my opinion, has to be very consistent and
Yeah.
not change things on them too much, because then they feel lost. They have to
Right.
feel at ease.
I think you're absolutely right. And you could spend the whole year, if you in third grade decided the goal of this year is that the kids are going to be familiar with the Hinani Check-In. Great. You just had a win, like think about, and then I'm going to attach it to Baruch midway through the year. I'm only going to do it 6 times the whole year. And the 4th time I'm going to attach it to Baruch. Great. You just changed their whole prayer life for the rest of their lives. And you didn't really, you didn't overwhelm them. I agree. Shouldn't try and throw too many
I
different.
recommend adding that if you have the ability in your synagogue, even if it's not a real minyan, because I had tried to do that for years and it never worked. This was the first time it worked. And it's the kids they're so much part of it. If, for instance, we don't have it, then they're like, why don't we go down for minyan? So it's part of their afternoon ritual. It's something special for them. It's so short anyways and not too much. So I recommend it, even if you only do it once a month with each group, you rotate, that it's a good experience if your synagogue has that time, or that 10 minutes, 12 minutes, once a month even, to give them that experience, that it's not always Shabbat morning, it's not always the full Sunday, that it can be that short experience. It can be different than what they're used to, because none of them have really done it before. So
Yeah,
that-
we found here the slot is that we have we have mincha every Tuesday for all the middle schoolers, but you can opt for mindfulness mincha or traditional mincha, and we use those 10 minutes as we just do a mindfulness exercise either related to tefillah, or this year we decided to connect it to the parsha each week. Right now we're kind of working through the Omer a little bit, so there's a lot of options. I want to
But I
make sure
recommend- once again, that's a 10-minute break and it's not a full lesson.
exactly.
And the kids are just eating out of our hands when we do it. So that's my experience to share with others.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to be mindful of the time. I know it's always good to get out at least 1 minute early, better than 1 minute late. So Marion, I'll turn it over to you for any last announcements, but thank you, everybody.
Great. Thank you so much, Oren. So much food for thought, little snippets of things to try out. If your school is still in session, I really urge you to try things out already now. Certainly everyone should, oh, you can, my screen is blurred, my background is blurred. This book that Oren shared, definitely worth purchasing, lots of great activities. As I mentioned when we started, this is our last session of this academic year. I'm so thrilled that so many of you have been at many of our sessions this year, and I look forward to continuing to see you. And as I also indicated, we will likely be sending out some sort of form soliciting your input for what kind of workshops you'd like to see next year. So really, I wish everybody a wonderful summer, a restorative time, and lots of time to plan for amazing things for your students for next year. So wonderful to be together. And as always, these workshops are this workshop is recorded, and we'll be posting it on our website and available to you as a refresher, and also to share with your staff if you'd like. So wonderful to see everybody. Have a great rest of the day, and see you at the end of the summer, the beginning of September.